This is the Mystic River Boathouse Park Implementation Committee meeting. It's Monday, April 4th. The meeting is to be held at 6 o'clock. It's being held virtually via WebEx. The meeting is being recorded. My name is Sandy Tishier. I'm the recording secretary and the moderator for the meeting. Present are Breck Perkins, Chris Gasserick, Debbie Downey, Baruch Rajab, Jim Kelly, Catherine Birchinell, Mike Crowley, Mike O'Neill, Rick Broberg, Steve Planchon, Susan Cullen, Tom Switz, Tim O'Brien, and an unidentified user. And Chairman Campbell was not here tonight, so Mike O'Neill will be the running the meeting, so you can take it over, Mike.
Thank you, Sandy. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag
of America and to the republic
for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
So I think we have a quorum, so we don't need to seat any alternatives. And Sandy, you say there's no comments from the public.
No public comments.
Okay. So can I make a motion to review and approve the minutes from last meeting? Everyone wants to take a minute and take a look at them.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's been a motion that's been seconded for the minutes.
Who motioned? I didn't hear.
Mike,
Oh, Michael O'Neill, you're motioning?
Yes.
And Thomas seconding?
correct.
All right, thank you.
So no correspondence. So down to old business. So Susan Cullen, could you bring us up to speed on the Brownfields grant application update?
Certainly, Mike. So we have submitted the Brownfields application ahead of schedule. It took actually 6 separate uploads to get all of the attachments and information across to the state. And we had in excess of 40 letters of support. That's something I've never actually seen before. So that was a pretty impressive number of people to support this. Our team included a lot of different people who, you know, put in their expertise and their time towards this. I really want to call out Debbie Downey for all of the extra work that she put in behind the scenes. Her expertise as an LEP helped us really make this the very best application it is, and I'm really grateful for her help. So I'm excited that it got put in. We should know something by June. We've heard in the background that they're very excited that we've put an application in, and we'll see how we rate. We certainly tried very hard in every bit of the rating and ranking to put in, you know, every little bit that we could that we thought would help support the application. I had a number of attachments. Of course, we have a great deal of information about the site from the remedial action plan. We have a lot of different environmental information. We have information about the Lovelace House, all of the new exhibits that you've just seen in the past couple months about the living shoreline. So there's a great deal of information to compile, and we were able to put it together and get it submitted. So now we're on our way.
That's fantastic. Congratulations for getting that done. Susan, any idea how many other grants we're up against?
There really isn't any way to know that, Mike. With the competitive format, you know, it could be almost any number. So, and you also can have more than one grant application from any municipality. So you can't even just base it on which municipalities, might be in the running because people might have multiple applications.
Okay. And then forgive me, but the process is they'll notify us if we want to be interviewed, and that happens, I thought, in May.
They are going to notify us, if we've made for the next round. And so that should be happening early this summer. And what we're hearing is that, we should hear something from the next step, maybe by early June. So I'm hopeful that we'll be, picked to go and interview and get questioned further. And we certainly have a lot of information to share. So
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll see how much we've put together and how much work and how many partners we've already sort of amassed in terms of making sure that, this is something that benefits a lot of different people, and hopefully they'll take that into account when they rank us.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So Susan, are there other grants that we're looking at as well right now, or is this the only one we're focusing on right now, or is there other? I know that
There
SHPO
are other grants that we're looking at right now. SHPO had indicated to us that our status with them in terms of the adverse impact might throw us out of contention for some of the things that we were wanting to compete for. But we've been told in another way that maybe we should try. So we are actually following up on another smaller opportunity that has to do with the living shoreline, and I've already sent them some preliminary information to see if they thought we would be eligible, and we've got a very positive, very positive feedback on that. So we will be, continuing to pursue that next.
Great, awesome. Well, very nice job. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Susan, for all your hard work in this, and we'll keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll get a positive result and get a swing at the table to give them, kind of our full presentation, because I know that was one of the great difficulties is they made us pare this thing down to just a very brief document. So I hope we get our chance to really have our day and show them what we're trying to do here. So again, thank you very much. While we're on the topic, Chad, I saw you're in. You mentioned that there's a couple of grants that you came across that were shoreline specific grants.
There were a couple that, yes, I forward those on to Debbie and Susan as well, just for their, they would have more expertise to see if they fit. I thought they looked pretty good. The difficult thing was timing, because I think they were due about the same time. So whether or not that's one of the ones Susan was referring to, I don't know, but there were some opportunities coming out for the living shoreline stuff, specifically through Connecticut. And then I'm also hearing kind of big picture stuff that the new round of funding, some of the new stimulus stuff, a lot of that they're expecting to be tied towards sustainability, living shoreline, and coastal resiliency stuff. So I'm hopeful that even if these ones that just became, it was very short notice on the ones that I had just found out about. So they didn't have a very long acknowledgement period. But I'm hopeful that even if we don't go after those, there should be more funding for that type of stuff coming in the not too distant future. As far as this project goes.
Great, thank you. So moving to the next discussion. So we, the Friends of Stonington Crew in the town have been working very closely to put together a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and the town. We were successful in getting that done, and it did get added to the grant proposal. We're very excited on the Stonington Crew side to move things forward. It was a bit of a negotiation between us and the town to try and look at the Lovelace House, which is really the biggest change from our initial conversations with the town when we first started the process. And Lovelace House obviously created a whole nother structure that we were going to have to deal with. At the time when we were working with SHPO, it really didn't make sense to bog the process down to try and figure out exactly how we were going to do this. So we got through the negotiations with SHPO, got an agreement. That agreement put the town in a position where they had to save one of the two structures, specifically the house. And we had put together some conceptual drawings at the time of how we could integrate the house with a boathouse structure, which SHPO agreed to, which is the basis of the town's agreement between the state and themselves on how to move forward with the park project. Over the last couple of months, I've worked with Danielle and town officials to try and basically think about how the house will be used, think about who will bear different responsibilities for the house. And I think we worked out a very good agreement. And really the basis of the agreement is that we'll share the responsibilities of the house. The town will basically pick up the early work to do the remediation in the house, move the house, provide the new foundation for the house, and do the site-related work for the house. And then the Friends of Santa Cruz will pick up with the adaptive reuse design work for the house. We are going to integrate public bathrooms into the house structure. Those public bathrooms will be the responsibility of the town to maintain, but we'll bear the cost of building them. And basically, we will build out the house to be a combination of kind of bathrooms, changing rooms, offices, and storage space for the boathouse. It gives us the ability to get things that we need, and quite frankly, what we did was reduce the scope of the boathouse structure and moved a lot of the plumbing and different aspects of the boathouse into the house to offset cost in the boathouse to help pay for the overall change in scope of the project. So again, we're excited about it. I think it's a great compromise between us and the town. I think it gives the park what it needs as far as public bathrooms and access to a facility. It gives us what we need as far as office space and changing rooms for the kids. So I think it's a nice compromise. So that was executed. I signed my side of it today. It went in, I believe, today with the grant proposal. So again, very excited to work with the town on that project. So before we go any further, any new business anybody wants to talk about? Hearing none, I have one, and I know I went through the notes from last meeting, and one of the things, and I think Breck, you brought this up, it would be nice if we could start to put together a kind of a tentative schedule from the town standpoint on how they think, if we are successful with this first round of funding, what the timeline might be with the park as far as the next steps. And I know, Breck, you had asked about kind of where we stood on permitting on the shoreline. If there's different areas of the permitting that we could get started on, it would be nice to at least initiate some of those processes and look at kind of a kind of broad brush schedule for the project as it moves out. We are trying to do the same thing on the Friends of Santa Cruz side with the boathouse. I do know that the hotel project at the seaport is slated to start this fall. So they're going to go right into construction, I believe, through the winter on that project. It would be nice to believe that we could maybe work at the same time with them, but that may not be a possibility. So again, Susan, it would be nice if we could just start to look at kind of how the town's going to lay out the schedule for this, kind of what they're going to prioritize, what things they'll look at first. And if there's any early permitting work that we can start on in regards to shoreline or any of the longer lead time items, that would be a great thing to do. So any comments?
I think that makes a lot of sense, Mike. And one of the things that I'll circle back with Chad about is, which of those grants that he's talking about was the one that we had already sent our intent in, that they had said that they thought they were, that it was a good fit and that we might be able to scoop some money from there for the living shoreline. So that might be a way to, take a smaller amount of money and help move that permitting and that effort forward while we're waiting for the interview round, basically for the brownfield. So we'll circle back tomorrow and see what we can find out.
Awesome. Thank you. Brock?
So as I recall, I don't know, maybe Chad, I know you're designing the landscape for the hotel, but it seemed as though that it was kind of essential that our parking lot got done for exit and entrance into the hotel. So it's kind of critical that timeline and our timeline are scheduled together, or else we could have some grading issues. And then second of all, I like 15 minutes on the internet, and I was able to find 2 or 3 different family offices that were doing philanthropy for Living Shoreline. So there's a bunch of money, private money out there that's doing oyster castles and things like that. So it wasn't too difficult to find it. So and there was a bunch of money, also private money out there for access to the water, to the shoreline also. So I don't know if these are grants that we want to pursue, you know. And they've got to be built for municipalities, so.
Yeah. So Susan, one of the things, obviously, we reduced our grant ask from the state. Have you spent any time thinking about, where, obviously you're looking at a couple other grants. Have you looked at big picture wise, where we're going to go from here as far as if we are successful with the money? I know that there was a couple of elements of the park that got basically put on hold with the idea that we'd phase the project. But has there been any more conversation on that?
Yes, Mike, there kind of has been, because to be able to really focus on the budget and put things together, we had to sort of list things in the critical path of what had to come first, what had to be sort of laid down, remediated, fixed, capped, grassed, what actually had to happen in what order, so that if we really had to focus the money and we were limited like we know we're going to be, then fine. Then we have to be reasonable. We have to keep going forward though. And so we had to know, how do we go forward and how do we make that happen? And so some of what we focused that budget on was really about that, about trying to take those steps in a critical path so that we can still keep moving forward, not stop the things around us from happening either, and be able to also at the same time in parallel fashion be going after other money in terms of the Living Shoreline, or if there's other money we can find for preservation of the house. There are a lot of sort of parallel efforts that have to go on, but we also have to really focus on the fact that when we had our taxpayers vote on that bond, what they voted on was really the establishment of that park. And so we had to make that the number one priority, is to get the park established. What would we have to do to, number one, get the park, safe enough for people to be on the site and established, and then to be able to build from there. And I think that one of the things that's going to happen, that we've talked a lot about in the background, is sort of the sense of excitement that we think will probably happen. When the garage structure, that barn structure, is taken down and the Lovelace house is moved over and things start to really be visibly moving on the site, that I think that there's going to be a real public, sort of outcry of people wanting to move this forward, move the project forward, be able to be on the site, use the site. And then hopefully that excitement will help us, on your side with the private fundraising efforts, but on our side in terms of the public sentiment too, that people will want to support, whatever the finishing parts are. If we can't afford the fancy light poles right off the bat, but later on people want to be in the park after dark, then we'll have to put up the light poles. So I'm hoping that some of the things that weren't integral to, the establishment of the park itself, those might be things that we don't have to do right off. We're not going to be able to afford it. But we are going to get that park established. We are going to get things on the ground, keep our promises to our taxpayers, and then we'll go from there. And hopefully that people will, once they see things moving, that excitement will generate not just more money, but maybe more public sentiment, maybe more public investment, maybe more private investment. So on a lot of different, sort of wavelengths, hopefully things will come together, and it probably won't be as quickly as we'd like it to be. Projects like this never are, but hopefully we won't lose that sense of wonder that people really wondered about when they were walking into the voting booth and they said, yes, they want this park. We want to get it for them.
Great, thank you. And I totally agree with that contention that I think once we start the process, there's going to be a whole lot more attention paid to the park, and it has been pretty quiet for a while now for various reasons. But I think the more we can start to push this out to the public, the more people will get involved and want to support the project as we go forward. So, any more comments on new business?
Hey, Mike. Mike Crowley.
Yes, Mike. How are you?
Question for Susan and Debbie. When you start to build a park, these different items, do they have to go out to bid?
Susan, can you answer that? Does this, I would imagine the park, because it's state money, all of the construction work for the park has to be done on a bid basis. Is that correct?
That's correct. All of the work will have to be done on a bid basis. It will have to be open and transparent bidding. There will be actually likely a lot of information coming back, hopefully when we get approved for the award, about how we have to do those procedures in terms of DECD. But my experience with them in the past is you sign a contract that tells exactly how you'll bid things, how you'll be transparent, that you'll post things on the DAS website. Depending on the amount of money, you could be dealing with prevailing wage requirements. There are a lot of those things that are pretty standard. And in some ways, it makes it, it makes it fair because then everyone has a chance. But in some ways, it does slow up the process because there is a lot of red tape.
Yeah, I would kind of think that as we move along, we should almost have that bid process. I imagine you're going to break it up, or maybe you're going to do it as one general contractor. Not sure, but I think you'd want to be ready as soon as this money becomes available to get right into the bid process rather than start at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, this is Debbie. That does make sense, Mike. I think that's one of the things we have to, have in our, basically we need to get going, thinking on the planning, what are we going to do first? And the bid process will certainly be part of that.
But do we have documents to bid with, Debbie?
I think we have to see what, like Susan said, what they're going to require, but the town does have bid documents. We would just have to obviously have the committee perhaps help put the details in, depending on, again, how many we need. And I don't know, Susan, maybe you can speak to that better, but I know we do have some in place for bidding.
One of the things that we could do is we could take a look at a previous grant and what was put together in terms of the contracts and information for that. But we always have to double check ourselves too, because when we sign those agreements with the state, there are times that they have their procedures change, things get adjusted. And so we have to be very careful that we follow their procedures, line by line. Because without that, you won't be in contention for the next set of grants. So I think there is a little bit that we can do to stay ahead of that curve, but we also have to be aware that, some of those things, we just have to be a little bit patient and make sure that we're waiting to know what's going on so that we can make sure that we sorry, something just turned on in my house and it's a little loud. Um, so it's, you know, when you go through these bidding procedures, Brett's right that you have to have, you know, you have to have your specifications outlined of what you're actually bidding for. And so, you know, we'll have to sit down and see what can we put together, what information do we already have, and what do we still need to put together to be able to go forward. So, but some of those things we won't really know until we get the award.
Okay, I have one more question. I'll keep still, maybe. Um, the parking, which has always been a big issue, and I don't think it's been straightened out yet. It seems to me that the biggest advantage, if I thought Danielle was going to talk to the people at the seaport and see if we could get some parking at that point. Has anybody talked to them?
Mike, I have not talked to them yet about parking. We've been very focused on the grant application itself. And so, although I'm well aware that that's something that we need to take care of, since it didn't have a deadline, it didn't come first.
And Mike, this is Debbie. I think Danielle has had some preliminary discussions with them, but I don't know how far those have gotten. And Susan's correct. We've kind of put everything into the grant over the past month or so.
I understand. I just want to make sure that we don't miss anything. But that parking is going to be a big item. And they were talking about a traffic study one time when Simmons was around here. He thought you were going to park on 27. I don't think we're going to live long enough to see that. But all this should be straightened out to have a good feel for where we're going once we get the money.
Well, that certainly is top on the list of next steps to look at the parking. Obviously, before you start building the parking lot, you have to understand everything else involved.
Chad, can you speak to that for a minute, just based on what the hotel is planning?
Well, I can speak, yeah, based on the last conversations we all had about it. It is a shared parking area between the town and the seaport. Everybody had agreed that that was a good concept, and I do believe the town did have some conversations with Steve before he had left. Those initial discussions about trying to figure out what that arrangement would be, both for those like 7 shared spots that were straddling the property line, as well as then the possibility of more parking in, you know, an upper lot or something like that. So, but I would also agree that I don't think those have gotten anywhere near to the agreement stage. And with a new president at the seaport and things like that, I think it'll be a new, you know, point of discussion as far as that parking goes. And we definitely heard from the police commission that they were not big fans of the on-street parking. In our permitting stuff, we did have fees in there for a traffic consultant to be able to look at that and have a discussion with the police commission if they were into it, or if you as a committee wanted to keep it in, or else it was just one of those things that gets removed. And we talked about different ways to do traffic calming along the road. So it's there, and I would agree with both Susan and Debbie that it's something that needs to be looked at and discussed probably as things continue forward while we're waiting on the grant application.
I believe that there was, this is Breck, I believe that there were preliminary discussions with the Little League field at the top of the hill about improving their gravel parking lot as overflow parking for when we were having regatta or events at the boathouse. So that was another strategy that was out that hadn't, you know, which hasn't surfaced in this conversation. So.
Correct. We did, Breck, that's absolutely right. That was one of the first groups we looked at, actually, was at the top of the hill. We did do a cost estimate you know, this is probably 2 years ago, of what that would cost. And I believe that's, when we looked at that and kind of talked about what that investment would be, that's when Steve kind of said it made sense to have some better discussions with the seaport because it's closer parking. In his opinion, it was kind of like, if rowers are showing up at 5 o'clock in the morning to row, even if there's a new paved parking lot at the very top of the hill, they're more likely to just park at the closest spot they find, which will probably be on the Seaport property. So why spend a couple $100,000 to pave a parking lot at the top of the hill? And let's figure out a joint solution that works for both. So I think it's still an option if it needs to be. But it seems like this, if a partnership can be worked out with the Seaport, that's probably preferable. But that's a discussion that definitely needs to happen between Danielle and the Seaport.
Okay, any other questions on parking or on new business?
Well, Mike, I'll throw it out there. It's had a little bit to do with the Seaport. Just so that you're all aware, I did do a class for the Seaport out there last week, I think it was. The Seaport has a homeschool group of kids that they come in once a week to do coastal science projects. And this was something Steve had brought up again several months ago as an option. It's been in the works for a while. And so they had their students come over via boat, and we did a little living shoreline talk. We looked at what was out there and existing. And so it was a great half hour to an hour of getting a few more people out on there in a supervised manner before we get it fully opened up to the public. But we talked about possibly doing something like that with the Nature Center as well. So just so that you're all aware that went on.
That's awesome. The more we can do that, the more we can introduce people to the property, the better we're all going to be, because that's what's going to create the excitement to get this done. So, all right. So keeping moving. So, any more new business before we move to the next? Okay. Any comments from the public? We have user unidentified. Any comments from the public?
Well, I have actually a quick question. Sorry, I think it may have gone our old business, but I know we're very hopeful about the Brownfield grant, but do we have a plan B in mind if things don't go our way with that money?
Susan, you want to touch that?
Right now, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that, Mike. We focus so much of our attention on the Brownfield grant itself. We have looked into some other smaller things, but because of the impact of that grant and really how large it is, how much of an impact it could have, we focused a lot of our attention on that particular one because we thought that was really our best chance.
And so if the worst thing happens, which is to say that they, don't let us go to the next phase, or they go to the next phase and they don't let us have it, is there some kind of a time limit before we get to reapply or something for next year or something?
The only time limit is really that we would have to go back and review, if we were turned down, what was really problematic about the application? Was it that something in the rating and ranking that we can't change? Was it something that we could bolster, get more information, do better? But you can apply every year. So we could apply again next year. And sometimes it may be also who you're competing against in the mix. There are a lot of pieces to this grant. We're not in an opportunity zone. We're not in a hub. We're not we're not a public investment community. Those are things that are defined in the Connecticut, realm by other people and other things. And so it's either a yes or no question to those. It's not as if we can't try. There is no round open to become part of the opportunity zones right now. So that's not something that we could reapply and do. That was something that happened 3 or 4 years ago. It happened on a one-time basis and it hasn't happened since. And since we don't have any of those, that answer isn't going to change for us until, such time as, someone gets them to reopen it so that we could maybe, apply to be one of the opportunity zones. So some of the things in terms of the rating and ranking, we don't have any control over. But there are other things that we do have a lot of control over. And with the amount of information that we put in terms of what studies had already been done on the site, what partnerships we'd already established on the site, part of what's sort of unique about this particular place is it encompasses so many different groups. It's not just the town. It's not just the Friends of Crew or the Stonington Community Rowing Center or the high school team, or, you know, we had over 40 letters of support from different people, different organizations that will benefit from this site. And so we're hoping that we'll rank really high because of those partnerships. And they're not just financial partnerships, although that is part of it. And that's part of what DECD looks at, is how much you're leveraging. They also ask us, you know, from our assessment grant, has it been fully spent? You know, did we close it out already? Have we used up all the money? They wanted to see the deliverables that we took their previous money, their previous $200,000 for that assessment grant, and what did we get out of it? And so that's part of what we're bringing forward in this new round for remediation, is you're taking that assessment money, you're taking those deliverables, and you're sort of showing them that you have the ability to perform in this realm. And so you're hoping that they'll trust you again and give you more money.
Rick, I'll jump in. This is Chad Frost. I'll just second that entirely. I mean, this is going to be a very competitive round. It's been a long time since remediation funds were available because of the bond delay. So everybody expects it to be very competitive. However, this is exactly the money that this project is meant for. This is remediation funds. This is our taxpayer dollars, you know, funds set aside meant to do remediation, and that's what this project, part of this project, is for. So even if we're unsuccessful this time, just like Susan said, I think you turn around and reapply as soon as those funds are made available a second time around. Hopefully we don't have to wait as many years as we did in this previous stretch. But that would definitely be a plan B, because that's what these remediation funds are for. And hopefully we can find all sorts of other littler grants in the meantime, but I would think that'd be plan B number one.
Okay.
Yeah, Chad, I concur as well. I don't think if we don't make it this time, it's any indication other than it's a very competitive grant process. And again, maybe the next go round there'll be more money available, so that would be the other possible benefit of, you know, going into the next round. There might be we might be able to get a larger sum of cash. So again, you know, thanks for the question, Rick, and it was a good one. But you know, cross our fingers and hope we get our money this time around. If not, we may have to wait a little longer. So thank you.
And this is Debbie. I had a great discussion with Mark Lewis of DEEP, who heads up the Brownfields group, last week. He's been and he's seen the site. He thinks it's an exciting project. And while he's only one voice, it was really nice to see that the state is behind our project and thinks it's a great idea.
Isn't there a formulaic equation actually to the money that they give you for planning is usually an indicator of a percentage of what you might receive for remediation? Chad, I think we had that conversation. It seems like 3 years ago.
We did. We had that conversation many years ago. It used to be, and Debbie, you can definitely answer this maybe even better than I can. It used to be that we'd always assume it's kind of in that 10% realm. And that's where we were kind of earmarking or hoping for that $2 million range on remediation funds. I wouldn't say that holds true necessarily anymore. And, you know, they kind of are handing out $200,000 as kind of their basic remediation or their basic investigation package. And then remediation isn't necessarily tied to it, but it used to be kind of closer to a 10%. This time, it's going to be really interesting to see how many people apply. I think, Mike, your question earlier about how many people, you know, applied, we won't know for a while until they release it. But I think it'll be very telling, right? If they had, you know, 10 million available and 60 million applied, you know, for grants, then that tells them they're way short. There's a lot of remediation that needs to be done, and the bond, it goes back to the bond, you know, we got to up the bonding next time around. So I think that's going to be part of what comes out. So the percentage I don't think necessarily works anymore, Breck, unfortunately. But we'll have to see what this whole round, what the interest comes in at.
I agree with you, Chad. I think that's definitely the case.
Okay, again, so any more comments from the committee? Okay, hearing none, any comments from the public? Okay, so hearing no comments from public or committee, it's a beautiful day. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I would move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Who seconded it?
Me. Jim Kelly.
Oh, you're an alternate though, Jim. You can't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for.
Okay, again, Susan, Deb, thank you very much for your hard work on this. It's a great milestone for us to get this grant in. And again, members of the town, I know, Tim, you were probably involved in the MOU. Thank you very much. We're very excited to move, get this project moving and get to the next step. So everybody enjoy the weather, and spring is here. We'll see you next month. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Give me a call.
Bye.